Nothing is falling apart, yet the morning already feels heavy. Not the kind of tiredness that belongs to muscles, or sleep, or effort. A quieter weight. One that arrives before the day even begins. And no one really warns about this kind of exhaustion. It doesn't come from crisis. There's no obvious loss, no dramatic collapse, no visible failure. Life looks intact from the outside, functional, acceptable, even good. And yet something inside feels overused. By the end of this reflection, this tiredness may no longer feel so confusing. Not lighter, but more familiar. This exhaustion doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't demand rest. It doesn't beg for change. It simply settles in. It shows up while brushing teeth, while answering messages without resistance, while laughing at the right moments, saying the right words, keeping things moving. It's the fatigue of continuation. Days stack neatly on top of each other. Nothing breaks the rhythm. Nothing interrupts the pattern. And somehow, that's what makes it draining. Because effort is still being spent, just not on survival. It's spent on maintaining coherence, on holding together a life that technically works. This tiredness often appears when life stops asking obvious questions. There is a job, or at least direction. There are people, routines, expectations. There is a sense of progress, or at least movement. And so the deeper questions stay quiet, not answered, just postponed. What drains the energy isn't pain. It's the constant low-level management of meaning. The subtle work of convincing oneself that what's happening is enough. That this rhythm deserves the effort it requires. That the days are not being traded too cheaply. That work happens silently, every day. This exhaustion has nothing to do with laziness. It comes from caring while pretending not to. From noticing small misalignments and swallowing them whole. From adapting again and again without acknowledging the cost. There is a moment when the mind realizes nothing is wrong enough to justify stopping. So it doesn't stop. And that's where the fatigue begins. There is a strange loneliness in feeling tired when life seems fine. Because there's nothing to point to. No explanation that sounds legitimate. No story that earns understanding. Saying something feels off, feels irresponsible when everything looks stable. So the tiredness becomes private, unspoken, even internally minimized. But the body remembers what the language avoids. This exhaustion often hides behind productivity, behind being reliable, behind functioning well enough to never raise concern. It doesn't collapse the system. It keeps it running, just slower, with less warmth, less curiosity, less presence. The days become thinner, not empty, just diluted. What's being exhausted isn't energy, it's attention. Attention stretched across obligations that no longer feel chosen. Across conversations that happen on autopilot. Across goals inherited rather than felt. Nothing dramatic is happening, And that's exactly the problem. There's no release. At some point, rest stops working. Sleep doesn't touch it. Time off doesn't restore it. Distraction only delays it. Because what's tired isn't the body. It's the part that keeps asking quietly, "Is this it?" and receiving no answer. That question doesn't shout. It hums. Constantly. There is a subtle grief hidden inside this exhaustion. Not grief for something lost, but for something never fully lived. For possibilities quietly set aside. For feelings postponed until later. For versions of life that were acknowledged, then ignored. Nothing tragic happened. Nothing demanded sacrifice. And yet, something was given up. Gradually. Reasonably. Without protest. This is why the exhaustion feels confusing. It doesn't match the story. The external narrative says, things are okay. The internal sensation says, something is being consumed. And neither is entirely wrong. This tiredness often appears during stability. After the chaos ends. After the urgent chapters close. When survival is no longer the focus. That's when the deeper weight emerges. When life stops demanding reaction and quietly asks for participation. There is effort in continuing a life that doesn't hurt, but doesn't fully meet something either. Effort in staying engaged without resistance. Effort in not questioning too much. Effort in remaining grateful while feeling unfinished. That effort accumulates. Not as stress, but as erosion. Over time, the exhaustion becomes familiar. It blends into identity, into tone, into the way mornings feel by default. And because it doesn't stop functionality, it doesn't get addressed. It gets normalized. The danger of this tiredness isn't collapse. It's numbness. The slow dulling of reaction. The quiet shrinking of desire. The subtle loss of inner movement. Not sadness. Not despair. Just a gentle withdrawal from depth. And yet, this exhaustion isn't meaningless. It's information. Not a demand to escape. Not a call for drastic change. But a signal that something internal has been carrying more than it admits. A reminder that functioning is not the same as being aligned. This feeling doesn't ask for fixing. It asks for acknowledgement. For a pause long enough to let the quiet discomfort speak, without immediately translating it into productivity or positivity. It asks to be noticed, not solved. Because sometimes, the most exhausting thing is not that life is hard, but that it continues, unchallenged, unchanged, while something inside waits to be recognized. And the question that lingers beneath this quiet tiredness is not, what's wrong? It's something softer, something more unsettling. What has been quietly ignored in order for life to remain fine?